Hi there. Right now, right this very moment, as I'm loading this clip, lawyers are gathered in the streets of Harare. They are demonstrating, they are raising their voices, they are demanding justice because the judiciary in Zimbabwe is no longer free. Today, Thursday, the 3rd of July 2025, marks another day in a long struggle against the capture of the coast by the regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa. Welcome to Afro Perspectives, and please just stay with us as we explore how Emmerson Mnangagwa has stripped the judges of their role to interpret rules in a fair, equitable and transparent manner. But let's pause for a second. What does it mean if we are saying there is no longer independence of the judiciary in Zimbabwe? Whose criteria are we using to reach such a conclusion? And what does this mean for the vendors hawking tomatoes on the streets of Harare, the school kids in Binga learning under mango trees, the Ningis and the Nangas trying to make a living in the rural hinterlands of Mzarabani? What does this all really mean? And the question that has to be asked is this: why is it just now that everyone is waking up to the reality that judges are no longer interpreting rules in a fair way? And what stops judges ruling in favor of the rights for every man and woman, every Zimbabwean, as they are specified in the Constitution of 2013 itself? Sit with us right now to the very end as we show you how judges have been turned into puppets dancing to the whims of one man, Luke Malaba, and his boss Emmerson Mnangagwa. Those lawyers out there protesting, they are not academics debating in ivory towers. They are at the front line, they are frontline witnesses to a broken system. A system designed to entrench the rule of one man, that is Emmerson Mnangagwa himself, and his designs to turn Zimbabwe into a Chinese-style dictatorship. Every day, the lawyers stand before judges who have been stripped of their independence, judges who no longer decide cases based on facts or law, but based on how Luke Malawa decides is the best way to please his bosses in ZANU-PF. This isn't just a theory. It's not some abstract argument. It's a brutal reality, what confronts us on a daily, day-to-day basis. The very day-to-day life of a living under the yoke of oppression. Those very same people who claim to have liberated us 40 years ago are now our very own oppressors. Opposition figures, dozens, maybe hundreds, have been arrested, and they continue to be arrested on trumped-up charges. They are dragged into courtrooms and locked up in those squalid cells at Harare Remand Prison, or worse, at Shikurubi. The Constitution of 2013 is clear. If you haven't committed a crime, you cannot be held for more than 48 hours without a charge. You must be released. But in Emmerson Mnangagwa, Zimbabwe, the police simply ignore this. They arrest critics on bogus claims. They keep them behind bars beyond what the law says. If the Constitution mattered, if courts were truly independent, if judges were interpreting the laws in a fair and equitable as well as transparent manner, these protests wouldn't be happening. But they are, because the very foundation of justice is under siege. And until that changes, until the judiciary, the judges can breathe free again, these lawyers will keep fighting. This is not the first time lawyers have protested on the streets of Harare. They have done so, they did so in 2021. But let's rewind the reels back in time to 24 February to be precise. Not more than 6 months ago, that's the day Blessed Mhlanga was arrested. But the story really begins a few days earlier when Mhlanga did something that in any free country it would be considered routine. He interviewed Blessed Geza, who dared to say what millions of Zimbabweans are thinking, that Emmerson Mnangagwa has failed, that maybe, just maybe, it's time for him to step down and let a fresh pair of hands handle our day-to-day affairs. And the surprising thing, that's not even a crime, that's a right. The right to criticize your leaders, the right to demand a better future for each and every Zimbabwean. And yes, the right to hold even the most powerful, even Emmerson himself, Mnangagwa himself, to account for what they are deciding on behalf of the millions of Zimbabweans. But it's not that this is considered a crime in Emmerson Mnangagwa's Zimbabwe. The police didn't see a journalist doing his job. They saw a threat to their power, and they reacted in the only way a fragile dictatorship knows how. They pounced, they brutalized, and Mnangagwa was arrested and slapped with a charge that sounds like it came straight out of a dictator's manual on crushing those who dare challenge tyranny. The charges were, I quote, transmitting data messages that incite violence or damage to property. But let's get this straight. No violence was incited. No property was damaged. There was no riot. There was no unrest. It was just a conversation between two honest individuals, two people committed to justice, two people committed for a brighter future for Zimbabweans, and it was just words. And yet Blessed Mnangagwa was dragged before a judge, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and each time bail was denied. Now let me make this painfully clear. He was charged under section 164 of Zimbabwe's Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act. And this piece of legislation, I have to remind you, was enacted in 2004. But read it closely and you will see it's little more than a repackaged relic of the colonial era. It's the modern day version of Ian Smith's Law and Order Maintenance Act, a brutal piece of legislation that was used to jail African nationalists. Yes, people like Robert Mugabe, people like Joshua Nkomo, people like Ndabaningi Stole. It was used to jail those fighting for the cause of liberation of black Africans. And here is the twist. Here is the twist of history that should make your blood boil. Emmerson Mnangagwa himself was arrested under that very same law in 1965. He spent 10 years in prison because of such pieces of legislation. So he knows it. He knows exactly how unjust these laws can be and how unjust they are. He has felt it, and he has lived under the very chains of oppression he is now throwing on the necks of ordinary Zimbabweans. But now Emmerson Mnangagwa is the new despot. He is the new king, and he has even dared to call himself the new King Munumutapa. And he can say what he wants. He holds the reins of power, Hanematomu, and he is using the same tactics, the same laws, the same fear. Because like every strong man before him, he is decided power must be guarded at all costs at the expense of the very freedoms we cherish as an independent and sovereign nation. And truth can be damned and justice can be buried. That doesn't matter. That doesn't count for Emmerson Mnangagwa. So when they arrested Blessed Mnangagwa, they weren't just targeting a journalist. They were sending a message. Speak up and we will silence you. Challenge us and we will break you. But here is the thing about dictatorships. They always overplay their hand. And in the end, it's truth. It's not tyranny that outlasts the silence. Just take a look here. I'm not going to bore you with a long lecture on the history of Zimbabwe's criminal law. That's not why you are here. You already know that. It's just common sense. It's just what's fair. It's just if you have done wrong, what every other Zimbabwean, what every man considers unacceptable. That's what we call a crime. But here is what you need to understand. Just like the white supremacists of old, men like Ian Smith, Emmerson Mnangagwa has turned the law into a weapon, a sharp, merciless tool to crush dissent, to jail his critics, to make sure anyone who dares to speak out is left to rot behind bars. Lawyers are a name for this kind of thing. They call it arbitrary detention. But let's drop the legal jargon for a second. What it really means is this: someone gets locked up even though they have not committed any crime at all. And that right there is the story of Blessed Mhlanga. What did he do? What law did he break? Nothing. Absolutely nothing you could point to. His only mistake, if we can call it that, was appearing on camera next to an opposition figure like a Blessed Geza. That was enough. That alone got him thrown into the dark, stinking cells of Harare Remand Prison. While in prison, Blessed Mhlanga was cut off from his wife and kids. No visits, no contact, nothing. Even Job Sikala, himself no stranger to political persecution, showed up at Harare Remand Prison just to check on him, just to check he was doing okay, and he was turned away. The order for such an act, it came straight from the top. Commissioner General of Prisons, Moses Chihovu, that's the man who ordered Job Sikala to be turned away. And what does that actually mean? It tells you all you need to know about Emmerson Mnangagwa's dictatorship. And it tells you that Blessed Mhlanga was not just an ordinary prisoner. He was a political prisoner, a prisoner of conscience, a man fighting for what is right and what is just for the 15 million of Zimbabweans. He was fighting for all of us, for our freedom. And this is what the late Father Zimbabwe, Joshua Mukabu Kongomo, this is what he meant when he said, Zimbabwe got its independence, yes, but the people themselves are still not free. Nyika yakawana rusununguko asi vana veZimbabwe vachingori nhapwa. There is no better way to put it across. When you are arresting people, including teenagers, mothers, even children as young as 1 year old, simply because they disagree with you, simply because they showed up at a braai or stood beside those whom you consider your enemies, what do we call that? That's not even governance. That's not even the rule of law. It's rule by law. It's dictatorship, pure and simple. And not just any dictatorship. It's a tin pot dictatorship. A regime terrified of the very people it pretends to save. So forget these bogus charges they like to throw around. Things like transmitting data messages that incite violence, that sort of thing, damage to property. Blessed Mhlanga damaged no property. He incited no violence. His only crime was refusing to bow to tyranny, to bow to the dictatorship of Emmerson Mnangagwa, refusing to play along with the dictatorship of Emmerson Mnangagwa. Yeah, well, and if you think Blessed Mhlanga's case was just some unfortunate one-off mistake, think again. This wasn't a glitch in the system. It's the system. This is what Emmerson Mnangagwa and his marauding bands of praise singers, the Varakashi, This is what they mean when they say, chunu ichi ndechedu takashibata kuti G. That's, they boast about it, they brag about it, they can say whatever they want. Just take this one tiny fact. On the 7th of May, after 72 days in prison, Mnangagwa was finally released, but not with dignity, not with an apology. They released him in the middle of the night, under the cover of darkness, as if Emmerson Mnangagwa's regime didn't want the world to see what they had done to him and what they had reduced him to. But the world did see. Images flooded social media platforms. Blessed Mnangagwa hugging his children, clinging to his wife. The joy in their faces, it said everything. But Blessed Mnangagwa, there was also the damage in his eyes. He came out of prison a haunted, a broken man. And what he wrote from behind bars on the 6th of April, to be precise, is enough to freeze your soul. This is what he wrote, and I quote him here. Prison, dear friends, is a dark place. It stains the soul and clouds one's judgment. For when in pain, alone and closed out of the world, life is not the same. I'm in pain, lost and sadly broken. This experience is not just a today event, but it will traumatize me for the rest of my life. Let that sink in. This is what Emmerson Mnangagwa's regime does to journalists and those who dare stand up to his dictatorship. And while Blessed Mnangagwa rotted in a cell for doing his job, his family survived only because ordinary Zimbabweans reached into their empty pockets to feed his children and pay for their school fees. This is the anatomy of a dictatorship. In Blessed Mnangagwa lies the fate of every Zimbabwean, lies the freedoms we think we had won. It lays bare the dictatorship, the tyranny, and the oppression we live on a day-to-day basis. This is arbitrary punishment, institutional cruelty, and a calculated war on freedoms our heroes like Josiah Tongogara, Herbert Chitepo, Alfred Nikita Mangena, this is what they fought and died for. But of course, ZANU-PF's army of Warakashe and his Polish spokespersons will rush in with the same tired script. This was just an isolated incident. It was a mistake. It was an aberration. Let me tell you something. It's not. This is how the regime works. This is standard procedure for the ZANU-PF dictatorship. This is how judges are told. This is why judges are told to deny bail to people whom ZANU-PF consider their enemies, to journalists, to critics, to those who believe in truth and fairness. They will arrest you no matter how flimsy the charges. This is how Emmerson Mnangagwa's regime weaponizes the cause to punish those who dare speak out, to break them, to remind every Zimbabwean, speaking up will cost you. And if you ever doubt that, just look at Blessed Mnangagwa. His story isn't a mistake. Now, let's talk about Jameson Timber and the Avondale 78. Those citizens for Coalition for Change, the CCC activists and supporters who were arrested alongside him. The date, 16th of June 2024, and the occasion, the Day of the African Child. Their crime, well, according to Emmerson Mnangagwa's police, it was hosting a braai. Yes, you heard that right. Jameson Timber invited friends and comrades to his home. They lit a fire, roasted a few burgos, shared a few drinks, and celebrated a day that's meant to honor the struggle and resilience of Africa's youth. But to the regime of Emmerson Mnangagwa, that wasn't a peaceful gathering. At least that's what we have been told. and that was, I quote here, an unlawful meeting. Let's be honest, what they really meant is this. If you are an opposition politician in Zimbabwe, even holding a braai in your own backyard is now considered a criminal offense. But hey, that's insane. Such a crime is not even on the statute books. There is no law against what Jameson Timber and the Avondale 78 did. But in Mnangagwa's Zimbabwe, what the law says doesn't matter. It's what he tells the judges to do that counts. And let's get back to Jameson Timber. Of those arrested, he is the most well known. His story, how he was treated, what the prison guards did to him, it's already all over social media. It was brutal. That is the treatment method to Jameson Timber. It was brutal, dehumanizing, and calculated to inflict damage on the man. But here is the part you are not hearing enough about. The nameless, the voiceless, the forgotten. That is the story of the Avondale 78. Take Maureen Dina, for instance. That's her on screen right on there. She was among those arrested that day. She had a 1-year-old child with her. But that didn't stop Emerson Mnangagwa's regime from throwing her behind bars alongside her baby. Now, if you think that was a tragic mistake, wait until you hear about Tambudzai Makororo. She didn't just get arrested, she was brutalized. Police broke her leg during the arrest. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they jailed her along with her child as well. He was just like under 1 year old. And here is where it gets unspeakable. Her son later died in custody. And what did they say to Tambudzai? She wasn't even allowed to bury her own baby. She was not allowed to say a goodbye. Not a moment of mourning. Just a shattered mother, locked in a cell, robbed of everything, her dignity, her sense of the self. This isn't law enforcement. This is state-sponsored cruelty. This is what happens when justice dies and repression takes over. Repression takes the place of the very freedoms we are supposed to enjoy as a free people. So the next time you hear Varakashi tell you Zimbabwe is a democracy, just ask them, since when does roasting a buruhosi on a braai stand need a squadron of policemen wielding truncheons and handcuffs? And since when does grieving for a child who has passed away, not out of disease, but out of the brutality of the police enforcing the wills of a dictator? And when does mourning for your own child become a security threat? So now you get the picture. You can see exactly why Zimbabwe's lawyers are out in the streets, robes off, voices raised, demanding that Emerson Mnangagwa put a stop to interfering with the judiciary. Because right now, the courts in Zimbabwe have abandoned even the pretense of justice. They don't ask whether you have committed a crime. They don't test the evidence. They don't apply the law. No, they just lock you up first and only release you when Emerson Mnangagwa decides you have learned your lesson. And that's the system we are being taught to endure. And that's the game we are being taught is fairness. It's not fairness at all. Well. We could talk about this all day. But let me give you just one name. Hopewell Chingono, a journalist, a truth teller, a thorn in the regime's side. Back in 2021, Hopewell was arrested 3 times in a space of less than 6 months. Yes, 3 times. And for what? The charges were that he was communicating falsehoods. Now, I don't even know if that's an actual offense under Zimbabwean law. But when prosecutors start throwing around vague Orwellian phrases like that, you know you are not in a courtroom. You are now in a cage. This isn't prosecution, it's persecution. And it proves beyond any doubt that the courts in Zimbabwe have become tools, not of justice, but of fear. It's a system designed to instill fear into all of us, the fear that if you speak out, you could be next. The fear that no judge, no law will protect you. It's only what ZANU-PF and the Varakashi wants that counts. Fear that the constitution is now just a piece of paper gathering dust in some forgotten drawer. So yes, this is why the lawyers are marching. Because if the courts fall, if the law itself becomes a weapon, then no one else is safe. Consider this, just one tiny, seemingly insignificant detail. But it's not. It's Article 50 of the Constitution of 2013, subsection 2 and subsection 3. And it says, well, it's called the 48-hour rule. And here is what it says. No one, not a single soul, should be held longer than 48 hours after their arrest and without being brought before a court. Perhaps I should have told you this earlier on. So it's not just that Emmerson Mnangagwa's regime is instructing courts to jail critics on trumped up fantasy charges. That's only half the story. What's even more disturbing is how the judges themselves are being appointed. Illegally, that is, and with impunity. No one dare challenge Emmerson Mnangagwa about that. But the lawyers are there protesting, and you can see they're making their effort to challenge that. Take the case of Justice Luke Malawa, for instance. By 2021, his time was up. He had served his constitutional 5-year term and reached the mandatory retirement age of 70. The law was clear. He was supposed to step down. But Emmerson Mnangagwa doesn't care much for rules when they get in his way. So what did he do? He simply changed them. He extended, he did not even change them. He simply pretended they never existed. And he extended Luke Malawa's term by another 5 years. Like a CEO, chief executive officer, renewing the contract of a loyal employee. And it's not hard to see why. This is the same Chief Justice who back in 2017, it might be 2018, I'm not very sure about this now. He ruled that the military coup that toppled Robert Mugabe, tanks on the street, generals on TV, he said it was perfectly legal. Nothing to complain about there, at least from his perspective. He called it just a military-assisted transition. And then in 2018, he went on to dismiss Nelson Chamisa's challenge to Mnangagwa's heavily contested election victory without even breaking a sweat. So what does Mnangagwa give? So what does Luke Malawa give in return for such loyalty? Well, he is given power, control, and a blank check to do whatever he pleases. And Malawa in turn, he instructs other judges on which rulings will keep his bosses in ZANU-PF happy. You don't have to take my word for it. I've loaded the letter on screen on there. It's dated 16th of July 2020, complete with the official stamp of the Chief Registrar of the Constitutional Court of Zimbabwe. And what does this translate to? That's Malawa's secretary sending down the marching orders. What we are witnessing isn't just a system, it's a political theater where the script is written at Matchbox House. Yes, that's the ZANU-PF headquarters. And the judges are just actors reading lines handed to them in envelopes stamped confidential. And if there is ever a shred of doubt, look no further than the Constitution of 2013. It's section 164, and it's clear, unambiguous. I quote here, the courts are independent. They are subject only to the Constitution and the law. That's not a suggestion, that's the law. And then it goes even further. And I quote here, the independence and effectiveness of the courts are central to the rule of law and governance. That's section 164, subsection 2. And now, don't get it twisted. This isn't just about angry lawyers waving placards outside the courts. The road goes deeper. And here is the kicker. Even judges themselves are not okay with what Emmerson Mnangagwa is doing to their independence. Back on 26 October 2020, a group of judges did the unthinkable. They wrote directly to Emmerson Mnangagwa himself. No riddles, no sugarcoating. Their message was crystal clear. And I quote here, "What is repeated in the public domain and on social media platforms about the capture of the judiciary is no longer fiction or perception. It is reality." And those were their sentiments, those were their words. And let that sink in. That's the reality. Judges in Zimbabwe's own judges, admitting the system is no longer theirs. It's now rigged in favor of like the power elites in ZANU-PF. And yet 4 years later, it's even gotten worse, because now these same judges are taking orders not just from Chief Justice Luke Malawa, but from ZANU-PF's own ideological indoctrination center, the Herbert Chitepo School of Ideology. Yes, you heard me right. A partisan training school is now scripting the judiciary's playbook. And who is at the helm of this operation? It's Ishmael Mada. Ishmael Mada. Again, but this time not as a CIO enforcer. No, now he is wearing another hat, principal of the Herbert Chitepo School. And his assignment to train the judiciary. And that session is scheduled just 2 days from now, on the 5th of July. And the judges are not being trained in justice, not in the theory or philosophy of law, but in how to weaponize the cause, how to behave as what ZANU-PF considers a true patriot. And being a true patriot in the eyes of Emmerson Mnangagwa and his band of praise singers is a judge who gives orders to crush those people who speak up, to silence those who criticize ZANU-PF, to tighten the screws on journalists or anyone who dares challenge the regime. That's what judges are being taught at the Herbert Chitepo School of Ideology. And let me be frank with you, this is no longer just a constitutional crisis. This is a hostile takeover of the last threads of accountability. This is the last kicks of the dying horse that is democracy in Zimbabwe. The courts, the final refuge for the oppressed, are being turned into tools of oppression themselves. Mark this date, the 5th of July, like I've said before, just 2 days from now. That's when the judges have to attend those indoctrination sessions at the Herbert Chitepo School of Justice. You don't have to take my word for it. I've loaded the invitation on screen for you on there. It's right there in black and white. Now pause for a second. Forget the fact that those judges have spent years studying the law, years grinding through clerkships, years shadowing senior jurists to earn their robes. Because to Emmerson Mnangagwa, none of that matters. Legal wisdom, judicial independence, that's not a priority to Emmerson Mnangagwa. What he needs is what the regime demands. It's a toy-toying yes-men in robes, judges who will jail opposition leaders and silence critics of ZANU-PF without hesitation, without question, without shame. And Ishmael Mada, in the eyes of the regime's dinosaurs, he is just the perfect man for the job. This isn't just a meeting, it's a chilling rehearsal for something far darker. Because when intelligence operatives start training judges, you are no longer in a democracy. You are in a courtroom-shaped prison. To those of you who have never heard of the name Ishmael Mada, listen closely. On paper, he is a director in the Central Intelligence Organization, Zimbabwe's shadowy spy agency. But that's not just but that's just the polite version, the diplomatic vanish. In truth, Mada is one of the men who runs what they call projects. And this is a cold clinical term for operations involving the abduction of ZANU-PF critics, their torture, and the political terror inflicted on them. It's something designed to silence those who dare challenge ZANU-PF's rule. Take this for instance. In August 2024, Ismail Mada led the notorious Ferret team, a name that now sends chills down the spines of those in opposition circles. That's the unit that kidnapped Takuzwa Ngaziore, the CCC's youth task force leader, and he was a sitting MP at that point in time. What they did to him cannot be described in words. He endured beatings, humiliation, psychological torture, and then, like garbage, they dumped him somewhere in the rural backyards of Mazowe there. It was not just Takuzwa Ngaziore alone. There was also another former MP, James Chidakwa. He was abducted, assaulted, and left for dead in Aturas, 30 miles from Harare. So let's be clear. Judges turning up and attending indoctrination sessions at the Airport Staple School of Ideology. This isn't just some intellectual tug of war over who has the best ideas or whose voice the people should follow. No, this runs deeper, much deeper. This is about power, brutal power, about who gets to rule Zimbabwe, about which ideas will shape the next chapter of our troubled nation, and which ideas will be buried, and which ideas will never be actually listened to. At the heart of it all, there is Emmerson Mnangagwa and his iron grip on power. The lawyers on the streets, robes off, fists clenched, and just protesting judicial capture. They are not just angry about judges stripped of their independence, about laws bent to save political masters. This is something else. This is a reckoning, because beneath the legal jargon, this is a confrontation with a brutal dictatorship that refuses to loosen its iron grip on the levers of power. This is a fight not just for justice, but for the very soul of Zimbabwe. Well, thank you for tuning in, and until next time, it's goodbye for now. Tatenda Siawonga. Thank you.